There we go, recording on. We are in week 6 of our study of Jacob. And we left last week in Genesis chapter 32. And we left, remember, Jacob was on his way back to his homeland. And he was with his 2 wives, 2 maid servants, and at this time, 11 children, 12 children, 11 boys and 1 girl, Dinah. And he had just given his brother, he had sent a bunch of gifts to his brother Esau ahead of himself to sort of soften the blow, because when he last left Esau 20 years ago, Esau said he was going to kill him. And so he is trying to soften the blow there right now. And what we left last week is he had stopped for the evening. He had sent his wife's maid servants and children across the stream or across the river, and he was by himself, and he wrestled with God, wrestled with an angel, wrestled in a vision. We don't
Certainly,
know. Wrestled.
Malak is a messenger of God. Yeah.
And so we had left in the middle of his wrestling, if you will. And I'm going to go back just a few verses so it makes sense. What's
the verse?
Let's go to 24. So we're in chapter 32, verse 24. So Jacob was left all alone, and there a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower Jacob, he struck the socket of Jacob's hip and dislocated it as they wrestled. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." "What is your name?" the man asked. "Jacob," he replied. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have wrestled with God and with men, and you have prevailed." That's where we ended last week, and I'll read the rest of this chapter. And Jacob requested, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask me my name?" Then he blessed Jacob there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, saying, "Indeed, I have seen God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed by Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon which is at the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was struck near the tendon.
So we talked about this last week, the word malak, which is, we often say angel, but it is a messenger. And Jacob hangs in for a blessing. And we talked about that. We talked about how Esau didn't care about the lineage, the birthright. He took it lightly. He sold his birthright for a bowl of stew when he came in from a hunt. And you see in Jacob, even though he's flawed, you see that he craves this blessing. And as I said, the blessing is a change of name. And that is indicative of a new life. You're a new person. So the blessing, what's the old saying? God may not give you what you want, but he gives you what you need. That's what Jacob has gotten here. The bit about asking his name, and I try to be careful about too much speculation. And there, if you go read commentaries, you'll get a dozen different versions of what that's about. But the response that says, "Why do you ask me my name?" I get the idea that it's, you know who I am. You know what has happened here. The idea is it Malak Yahweh? Is it the messenger of God? The idea that it is Yahweh himself, I don't think that he wrestled with God. And so when he says, I have seen God face to face and have lived, again, is he saying that this is Yahweh come to earth and he wrestled? That I don't think is the point. But he does recognize in fact, we talked last week, you remember, where he says the sun's about to come up. I think there's a good chance that this happens in a dream and a vision, just like the other examples I gave you. Daniel, who sees these things that he wakes up from. Does it matter? I mean, does it matter? The fact is that he does contend. He's been contending with God all his life, though. And this time, he's looking for a blessing, and what he gets is a new name. He becomes this new person, and that's what's important. But he does recognize that he got by with this. That rather than being maybe struck down for daring to do it, that he's been able to go through this struggle with God, and he's survived it. So, you know, we see that several times with him, that he recognizes what God has done for him. Now, the last bit, where the tendon of the hip and his hip dislocates, and to this day they still don't eat the tendon. That just because someone does it does not mean it was God ordered. They may honor this by saying we're not going to eat that, but it doesn't mean that they were supposed to take from this that there's something about that tendon that you shouldn't touch. And I mention these things, first of all, a lot of the time we go to Bible studies or we read on our own, and it seems like what's being said is, okay, a guy did a thing. I get that all the time. You know, I mean, they say, when I read this, I don't see all that. A guy did a thing, and then the guy did another thing, and then he died, and another guy did something. These things are part of a cohesive story that you know, a plan that goes back and comes all the way through. So the idea that they would take that and say, we'll honor it by not eating that tendon, that's a man-made construct. That's a human thing. It's not something that says there's something magical about that tendon that they're not supposed to touch. And again, I do this because I read the commentaries, and I'm always conscious of the fact that some of you may read commentaries, and there's some kind of bizarre stuff out there. So I want to clear that up. I mean, they may have decided to honor this, but it doesn't mean that if you touch, you know, if you consume from an animal a tendon near the hip, that you've done something contrary to God's wishes.
And God's timing, I don't think is an accident. Like Scott said, he had been wrestling with God all his life, but this incident happened prior to him coming back to meeting Esau. And when we go on to chapter 33, now he's going to meet the brother that he hasn't seen for 20 years.
He is, in fact, about to cross the river and come home. Remember, that's been the promise. You're going to go away, but I'm going to bring you back. He comes back as a new person. This is just before he crosses the river to come back home. He's gone through all this preparation, and this is the final bit, and he comes home as a new person.
Chapter 33. Now Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming towards him with 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maidservants. He put the maidservants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph at the rear. But Jacob himself went on ahead and bowed to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. Esau, however, ran to him and embraced him, threw his arms around his neck, and kissed him, and they both wept.
Keep going. There's one more.
Okay. When Esau looked up and saw the women and children, he asked, "Who are these with you?" Jacob answered, "These are the children God has graciously given your servant." Then the maidservants and their children approached and bowed down. Leah and her children also approached and bowed down. And then Joseph and Rachel approached and bowed down.
That's good. So we've talked last week about how Jacob is trying to soften the blow. He's come home and he's afraid that his brother still wants to kill him, as he should be. I mean, and you know, Julie said something this morning about it being a family reunion. I don't know about you. I don't think I've ever been to a family reunion where someone didn't fight. Jack's laughing. You knew what was coming, didn't you? I mean, families fight with each other. And this was pretty serious. Esau had said, "I'm going to kill him. As soon as my dad dies, I'm killing him." So he's going through this elaborate plan of sending servants out, sending gifts out, and then he puts the women and children. So Esau is going to keep seeing all these things that Jacob hopes will soften his heart. And it appears that he didn't have to. Esau has, kind of gotten over it. At least that's the way it appears. And he comes and embraces him. Jacob is on the ground. He bows 7 times, face down. You notice he refers to himself again as your servant. But the women are there, and he and Jacob embrace. And then Esau turns and sees these women. He says, "And who are these?" And you can imagine the first time that you meet, it's a Wonderful Life. Remember, the brother comes home on the train, and he's got this wife with him that they didn't know about. Well, who is this? And you know who it is, but you see human beings in this thing. We see life. It's not just some guy did a thing. And he says, "These are the wives and children that God has graciously given your servant." He's still humbling himself, your servant. But these are the wives and children that God has given me. And I guess, I think there's probably a mix. I think Jacob understands that now. But at the same time, he is also posturing for Esau so that he establishes the who's who of
and he puts them in the order of importance.
But that's the last part I was going to say, is you notice he sends the Leah, the other wife, the maidservants.
The maidservants first.
The mothers, it's the maidservants, then Leah, the mothers of these other children. But then at last, it's him and Rebecca.
Rachel.
Rebecca, but Rachel. And we laughingly said, you see the problems with polygamy, but look at what this does. What does this do to Leah? She's in front, but when he comes at the end with, it's him and Rachel. And it has played out over time. And we're going to see the fact that there are different mothers come back to make an important part of this story coming up.
And the thing to note here is that the only child that is mentioned by name is Joseph.
That's true.
Which is Rachel's first son. "What do you mean by sending this whole company to meet me? To find favor in your sight, my lord," Jacob answered. "I already have plenty, my brother," Esau replied. "Keep what belongs to you." But Jacob insisted, "No, please. If I have found favor in your sight, then receive this gift from my hand. For indeed, I have seen your face, and it is like seeing the face of God, since you have received me favorably. Please accept my gift that was brought to you, because God has been gracious to me, and I have all I need." So Jacob pressed him until he accepted.
And there's, maybe Esau's a little insulted. What are you sending all this stuff for? I mean, I've got stuff.
And remember, he sent lots of stuff.
He sent lots of stuff. He says, "What did you send all this stuff for? I've got plenty. I've done pretty good on my own." And again, you see in this people, and Jacob insists, no, I really, I have to insist. In the Middle East, there is a whole litany of rules for these situations. You offer something to someone. If they come to your house and you offer something and they don't accept it, it's an insult. It's a grave insult. And you stay like in Jordan, the guy talked about it. You have someone over, we have dinner, we do all these things. And then at the end, when it's time for them to go home, when you decide, you know what, it's been great, but I'm ready for you to leave my house now, you serve coffee. And if they don't drink your coffee, it's an insult. It really, and we don't understand these things, those customs. They don't understand a lot of ours either. But they have this. So when Jacob offers this and Esau says, "I don't need you to give me anything. I mean, I've stayed here. I've grown. I got a lot of stuff." And Jacob says, no, I insist that you take the gift. There's a certain amount of that's probably custom, but also if Esau takes the gift, it's one more softening. Jacob, I think we see that Jacob is still not convinced that Esau's not going to start thinking. You remember Laban's sons? Do you remember how Jacob had the striped and spotted off-colored cattle, sheep and goats? And Laban's sons start seeing that and they go, hey, wait a minute. At first, everything's okay. And then they start realizing, hey, this is coming out of our pocket. Hey, and I think there's still a concern that Esau, once Jacob actually moves in, is going to say, I had all of this land to myself, and now I've got to kind of split it. So Jacob's insistence, I am convinced, is also because he wants to make sure that Esau at least is somewhat beholden to him, that he's come in. So there's, and there was one more thing at the end of that.
Then Esau said, let us be on our way, and I will go ahead of you. But Jacob replied, my Lord knows that the children are frail, and I must care for sheep and cattle that are nursing their young. If they are driven hard for even a day, all the animals will die. Please let my Lord go ahead of his servant. I will continue on slowly at a comfortable pace for the livestock and the children until I come to my Lord at Seir. Let me leave some of my people with you, Esau said. But Jacob replied, why do that? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. So that day, Esau started on his way back to Seir, but Jacob went to Succoth, where he built a house for himself and shelters for his livestock. That is why the place is called Succoth.
And this is why I say I think that Jacob still doesn't trust Esau, that he's still worried. And you see, Esau says, man, this has been a great reunion. Let's go back to my home now. Let's go back and settle in a little bit. And Jacob says, yeah, the kids are tired. We've been traveling a long time. You go on ahead. And so Esau says, well, let me leave some of my guys with you. Does this not sound to you? I mean, Jack and I went and I shouldn't probably even mention this. If I've told you about the traditions and the stories in the Middle East, and the idea if you trick someone out of their goods, you can actually be a hero. They celebrate it. That's sort of their Paul Bunyan stories. And here, if Jacob, let's suppose that Jacob doesn't trust Esau still. He thinks that there's going to be something bad coming. And Esau says, here, let me usher you into my lair. And Jacob says, he comes up with this excuse. They've traveled all the way from northern Syria, maybe up into Turkey. But now the kids are tired. I can't go this last little bit because the kids are tired. The wives are tired. We're going to go. The animals are tired. We'll go slowly and I'll catch up to you. And Esau says, well, let me leave some of my men with you. Now, on the flip side, they've just traveled from northern Syria and maybe part of Turkey, and they've come all this way without any of Esau's men. Why do they need that suddenly? And maybe they're both on the up and up, or maybe they're both, they don't trust each other. But Jacob just insists once again, let me find favor in my Lord's sight. If you ever loved me, go ahead and go. I'm okay. This is humanity, and this is family playing out. And Jacob says, I'll catch up with you. I know where home is. Remember, I used to live here. I grew up here. I'll catch up with you. And then he doesn't. He goes to another place. And we can interpret that a lot of ways. But I think, yeah, Jack.
You brought my name up and continued, and it looks like maybe I deceived you or something.
We went and picked up a piece of furniture from someone, and because I was in the computer business, I dealt with some of these traditions about dealing, and as it happens, it was a Middle Eastern person. And we went through one of those negotiations yesterday, didn't we? I mean, you saw it firsthand. And I'm not angry. I'm not running them down. I'm saying that I've been through the mill. I know how the negotiations are done. And I think that's what I'm seeing here. I mean, no, you didn't deceive me. The person was just, I paid asking price for something, which, I should have haggled. And so then they began trying to sell me other things. And we went through, and it's not, I don't take it wrong. I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I'm saying that this is the way business is conducted. And in this case, they're both sort of, and why is Esau wanting to leave men? He may just be glad to see his brother. And he may be offering to help. We don't know. But I will tell you, Jacob says a comment here, and I want you to, this is one of those beautiful things. I love this statement. He says, seeing your face is like seeing the face of God. It's like the sun shines on me, okay? And remember what's happened with Jacob the night before? He's seen the face of God, or at least this messenger of God. So this is fresh in his mind. And I think, genuinely, the fact that Esau came and didn't attack them, it sort of is like a blessing from God. This is one of those things. I love these stories because we see real people. We don't see myths or icons. If you were going to design patriarchs, if you were going to do a design a religion, wouldn't you design something where they had fewer warts and flaws and everything? God uses people. And as I try and remind everyone, that should be some consolation or some comfort to us, that God uses us before we get perfect, because we're never going to be that. And he has a plan. And that's one of the things that we see.
After Jacob had come from Padan Aram, he arrived safely in the city of Shechem in the land of Canaan, and he camped just outside the city. And the plot of ground where he pitched his tent, he purchased from the sons of Hamor, Shaman's father, for 100 pieces of silver. There he set up an altar and called it El Elohe Israel.
So he had gone to a place called Sukkoth. It's actually Sukkot. There's one of the religious observances that persists today called Sukkot. A Sukkot is a shelter. It's sort of a tent, but they'll set up poles if they have the wood to do it. But a Sukkot is a temporary sort of shelter, and they lived in those as they were coming out of Egypt back to the Promised Land. But in this case, he names the place Sukkot because he went there and set up this shelter. But now he goes to get a new place, and you notice I mentioned this. He didn't go where Esau is.
He's not there yet.
He told Esau, I'll be right along. But instead, he goes way, way out of the way. And you got to wonder, what did Esau think of that but he buys a piece of ground, pays a good price for it. That's what you're supposed to get from this 100 pieces of silver, and sets up an altar. And then he calls the place El Elohe Yisrael.
Yes. And
what that means, El is always God. Remember, I told you that in Hebrew names, when they Israel, Ezekiel, that's always God. It's got something to do with God. But El can also mean mighty, because those are sort of the same thing. So El Elohe, what that means is, I think, it's not God. It says mighty is the God of Israel. And after all he's been through, he recognizes the hand of God. I believe that the fact that Esau doesn't attack him, he recognizes the hand of God, maybe the softening of hearts. So he takes the time to commemorate that. That's what we're supposed to see, is that he is aware, he pays attention to the presence of God in his life. And he sets this place up as a testimony to that. Mighty is the God of Israel.
But the other thing to know here, he's in Canaan. Do you want to pull up the map?
I didn't set it up.
Oh, okay. Is it still there from last week?
No,
okay.
It's not on the screen.
Okay. he is in Canaan, which is a pagan land. And so Hamor and Shechem are Canaanites, and so they are not followers of Yahweh. We should know that before going forward, right? Chapter 34. Now Dinah, remember Dinah is the only daughter of these 11 children, and or 12 children, and she is the daughter of Leah. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, had born to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land. When Shechem, son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the region, saw her, he took her and lay with her by force. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved the young girl and spoke to her tenderly. So Shechem told his father Hamor, "Get me this girl as a wife."
Yeah, this is one of those things, and this is the unfortunate reality. We talk about the fact that women are respected within Judaism, within this religion, but at the same time, there's no question that they've got a different place. And she says she goes out to visit with or meet the daughters of the land. So I don't know, maybe she's the only girl her age in the whole tribe, and she goes out looking to meet somebody. Now, I shouldn't speculate, but you think, I don't know, maybe she's going out to look for boys that aren't her brother, but she's gone walkabout. She's gone out to meet some people, and this guy, and that's Shechem. The land is named Shechem, and the son of the king or the ruler, whatever his title is also named Shechem. That's not an unusual thing that happens, but he sees her and says lays with her by force. He takes her by force. And then this bizarre thing where he says his soul is taken with her. He talks to her tenderly. That's just creepy, But it's for us, it's weird. It may well be that among these people, what he's done is not such a big insult. You have to, I'm not saying it's right. Do not take that I'm saying that it's right. I'm saying that it may be more customary. And since he's the sort of the son of the chieftain.
Because it says he was a prince. He was a prince of the region. So you have to assume that Hamor was the head of the area.
And that sort of thing goes on today, where rulers and children of rulers do things like this. But he says he's smitten with her, and he goes to his dad and says, "Get me this woman as my wife." He does recognize, there is still recognition that you can't do this, you can't make her an official wife without the approval of the father, the family. And there's a bride price, there's a dowry that gets paid, this joining of the peoples. But there's a dowry, especially among these wealthy people, that the father of the bride, the family of the bride, is going to be compensated. And there are forms to go through. And so he's not just going to say, here, you're not leaving my tent. You're captive now. He goes to his dad. Dad's rich. You got to see humans in this. Dad, they're rich and he's powerful. And he knows daddy's going to get him whatever he wants. So go do the stuff. I'm keeping this one. I know it sounds sad, but what else do you say?
Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled his daughter Dinah, but since his sons were with his livestock in the field, he remained silent about it until after they returned. Meanwhile, Shechem's father, Hamor, came to speak with Jacob. When Jacob's sons heard what had happened, they returned from the field. They were filled with grief and fury because Shechem had committed an outrage in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing that should not be done. But Hamor said to them, "My son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife. Intermarry with us. Give us your daughters and take your daughters for yourselves. You may settle among us, and the land will be open to you. live here, move about freely, and acquire your own property.
Let's stop there if we can. This is an odd thing. So Jacob hears that this has happened. I guess the grapevine, because it appears that Dinah is still there with Shechem. And Jacob hears about this, but it says his sons are out with the flocks in the field, so he doesn't say anything. And
this bothered me this week.
It bothered Mary all week long. I think up until this morning, maybe still, that he didn't say anything. And we love to judge biblical characters, but they're foreigners, they're strangers in the land, sojourners, if you will. And I want you to picture that you come into a new country and you got a lot of livestock, you're on their land, and they see that as a threat.
Well, he did buy some of it.
He could, and I think he bought some, but not enough for grazing all of those flocks. So you come moving into an area and they see you as competition. There's a conflict often. And so Jacob, what's he going to do? Go riding into Shechem and threaten them because of what's happened to his daughter? He's going to, A, start a war, but B, it's just him and he's old. Should he have said something? Yeah, I mean, I would, but he also recognizes it's just him. The tribe, the 11 sons at this point, they're all out with the flocks. So he keeps it to himself. And just about the time the sons come home, the dad comes of this young man. And he says, my daughter is taken, my son is taken with your daughter. He's smitten with her. He wants her for a wife. Look at this and the way it reads, and it does not appear that he thinks anything is amiss. It's quite possible that he doesn't understand the outrage. And he says, look, give her to my son as a wife. Come move. He's offering to be part of, you guys can be part of the family. You can stay here. We'll intermarry. We'll take your daughters. You take our daughters, which incidentally, to widen the gene pool is not necessarily an unhealthy thing. But these are Canaanites. These are pagans. They don't understand that this is not going to be something that Jacob and his people are going to be hip to. But he is saying, you come here, you acquire land. You're not going to necessarily take land. We're going to allow you to have land here, property. There are places today that you as an outsider are not allowed to own land in that country. Come in, it'll be great. We'll be family, and he's offering him. I think in his mind, he's being very gracious. The sons hear about this and they're outraged. Don't forget that even today we hear about this custom of honor killings. Remember when the daughter goes outside of the religion or outside of, the ethnic group and marries or gets a boyfriend, they sometimes kill the daughter. They kill the sister because it's an honor killing. Well, these brothers, and these are grown men now, and they hear about this and they're angry, they're outraged. And Mary and I talked about this week. When you've got a tribe of sons, the chances are some of them are going to be a little wilder than the others. And they get together and they start going back and forth. This thing is a problem. I've got nephews like that. And the three of them get together, especially when they were young, and bad things happen. So you set the stage for what's about to happen here. The brothers are angry, but this guy, the dad, is offering what he thinks is a good deal. And not only that, he says, come up with a bride price, come up with an expensive dowry, and I'll pay it. We've covered that. When someone says name your price in the Middle East, it doesn't mean that you get to really name your price, because I got a pretty big imagination. But it does say, he is saying, you know what, you make it expensive, and to show that I'm sincere, I'm going to pay you a lot. We're going to finalize this. Now, he's got an angle, as we'll see, but there's the stage set for what's going on. And these brothers are outraged. Jacob is wise enough or canny enough to recognize they're outnumbered in this country. they may have a lot of cattle, and there may be, you know, a tribe of sons, and they have people with them, but it's still not enough to start a war with these people. So he's in a quandary, you know, if you want to call it a moral dilemma. Is it enough of an outrage to commit suicide over by starting a war that you can't possibly win? These are the things that we face as human beings. They're clearly outraged. He's clearly not in favor of this. So what do you do about it? Those are the problems we face.
So I had ended reading with Hamor talking to them. Now the son Sheshem is going to talk. Then Sheshem said to Dinah's father and brothers, grant me this favor, and I will give you whatever you ask. Demand a high dowry, an expensive gift, and I will give you whatever you ask. Only give me the girl as my wife. And, you know, in some ways, this is, remember back to Jacob wanting Rachel as his wife. I mean, he was willing to work 14 years for Rachel.
Yep.
I mean, this is a little different, but okay. I'm on verse 13. But because Sheshem had defiled their sister Dinah, Jacob's sons answered him and his father Hamor deceitfully. We cannot do such a thing, they said. To give our sister to an uncircumcised man would be a disgrace to us. We will consent to this on one condition, that you become circumcised like us, every one of your males. Then we will give you our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves. We will dwell among you and become one people, because you will not agree to be, but if you will not agree to be circumcised, then we will take our sister and go.
So you see that the father has come in, and he's actually come in to talk to Jacob. Jacob's the head of the household, the head of the tribe, but the brothers have shown up. And so he makes this offer that says, I'll pay you. I mean, I'll give you a big dowry. Your family will be enriched, and we're gonna be like one big happy family here. And suddenly the brothers are doing the negotiations. They're young and vital. Jacob is old, but it's still not their place to do this. And yet there are 11 of them, and they're handling the negotiations. And they said, it says deceitfully. So you know that what they say is not the real deal. But they said, you know, we got our traditions, and there's no way we're marrying our sister off to some, you know, pagan guy, as if the circumcision is the thing that makes you a follower of Yahweh. Does that carry through? Well, there's no way we're going to marry our sister off. One of our signs, and this came up this week, the Jews are not the only people in that have ever circumcised as a thing, but it is their part of their covenant. But he says, unless you guys all agree to do this, we're not going to let you marry. We'll just take our sister and go. And so that's what makes me think that she's still with the son, that he has kept her there, because they said, we'll take our sister and we'll leave. I don't know, the idea of getting all the men to go through this procedure after they're grown, you know, that's where you see the power of a leader in that time, because that would never happen. I can tell you, I don't care how much the son wants to marry this woman. There's another village. I'll go over there. You're on your own. So this is a deceit, though. It tells us that's not really what's going on.
Their offers seemed good to Hamor and his son Sheshem, the young man who was the most respected of all his father's household. Did not hesitate to fulfill this request, because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. So Sheshem has just already been circumcised now. So Hamor and his son Sheshem went to the gate of their city and addressed the men of their city. These men are at peace with us. Let them live and trade in our land. Indeed, it is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters in marriage and give our daughters to them. But only on this condition will the men agree to dwell with us and be one people, if all our men are circumcised as they are. Will not their livestock, their possessions, and all their animals become ours? Only let us consent to them, and they will dwell among us. And all the men who went out of the city gate listened to Hamor and his son Sheshem, and every male in the city was circumcised. Greed is a bad thing, huh? This was all for all these sheep. And
what he does is go back and put a sales pitch on. He tells all of these guys, look, these people are rich, and if we get them hooked into the family, we're going to benefit from it financially. We'll all have a share. It's going to be great, I promise. And they're at peace with us. They didn't come in to push us out. So we got a lot of land. Let them come in, and we'll all be enriched. And how can I say this without getting into but it's like wanting outside investment into the community. Often we're willing to give up as a community an awful lot because we want that outside money to come in, right? And that's all I don't want to get into local stuff, but that's the way it is. And he has seen that these people. Now, what does that tell you though? Jacob and his sons are already living in the area, in this land, correct? So what's going to change if they go through with this deal? Jacob and his sons are outsiders. In Judaism, in the Bible, we always hear people called sojourners. They're outsiders, and they will always be outsiders, at least in this generation. So they're living in the land, but they're not part of it. And that becomes important later on as well. But we see, even in the law, that they were told by God that you need to be welcoming and you need to be kind to sojourners, to these outsiders. That's who they are. And they're saying, if we come in and the father is saying, if we intermarry, we'll be family. And it'll be good for, and the guys want the wealth infusion enough that they agreed to all go through the circumcision, which is just astounding. There's not enough money for me to do that.
3 days later, while they were still in pain, 2 of Jacob's sons, Dinah's brothers, Simeon and Levi, took their sword, went into the unsuspecting city, and slaughtered every male. They killed Hamor and his son Sheshem with their swords and took Dinah out of Sheshem's house and went away.
So we're told which 2 brothers. And remember how this takes place. We have Leah, the first wife. We have Rachel, the second wife. Yes. And then the 2 maidservants. Remember all that where they're competing for having the sons. Dinah is Leah's daughter. And the 2 sons that go in and do this are Leah's sons. Now you begin to see the divisions that come up with having different mothers. It's one tribe, but it's still they're more invested because this is our full sister. I don't know what they had in mind when they tricked them and said you have to do the circumcision. But you're real certain that at least these 2 guys did exactly what they had planned. They apparently know that on the 3rd day, that's about the worst of it. And these guys can't get up and fight. And they ride into town and kill all the men. They kill everyone, all the men at least. The Shechem, his father, Hamor, kill them all. And this is not something that they're supposed to do. Again, some people tell it like how bloodthirsty, the Bible is. This is a bad thing what they've done, and it's gonna cause problems.
You sort of get the idea. So there's these 11 boys, and they all decide to do this deceitful thing at the beginning with, telling them we'll go along if y'all get circumcised. Then 2 of the boys decide we're going to take this a little further. And we're going to actually kill him. That's the thought you get here. And then you get to this next.
Well, let's say before we, go ahead. Are you still in the same section?
Yeah. Jacob's other sons came upon the slaughter and looted the city because their sister had been defiled. They took their flocks and herds and donkeys and everything else in the city or in the field. They carried off all their possessions and women and children, and they plundered everything in their houses.
Now we're seeing when it's just the two sons. Remember, the two sons come in and kill the men because they're incapacitated. And we justify things like that. Humans say, well, you know, that look what he did to our sister. But everyone else in town didn't do that to the sister. Even if you want to blame the father and son, all the other men in town didn't do that. But they use it to justify this act of rage that they've gone through. And I mentioned the honor killings for a reason, because there's people justify their actions in this. And later on, and I'll skip just a little bit, but most of you have heard the story. Joseph, he sort of is lording it over his brothers, and they dump him in a pit. Remember?
We'll get that next week.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm just going to say that some of the brothers go, hey, wait a minute, you know, we don't want his blood on our hands. Let's just sell him. They have second thoughts. So the two brothers ride in and kill everyone, but then the other brothers come along and see the slaughter. And they say, well, you know, I mean, he did defile our sister, or they did defile our sister, and they take all their stuff. They take the women and children. Those become slaves. And they take all their possessions from their tents, their buildings. They take all their livestock. This is, when I say that these people are not perfect, this maybe is the best example of all. This though is way out there. This isn't even a gray area. They didn't participate in the killing, but they certainly participated in the looting.
Well, we'll find out right now. We'll also find out in future chapters that the fact that Simeon and Levi did the killing has a effect going all the way forward in history. Jacob thinks of them differently, that their responsibilities were different. And remember, this whole story, the reason we're learning about it in the first place is Jacob becomes, his now name is Israel, and he ends up having 12 sons and the 12 tribes of Israel. So we'll find out about Simeon's and Levi's. Don't get it.
They get cut out of the will.
So
bottom line, Jacob finds out about this and they get cut out of the will.
But so this is one of those things that if you're in church and just hear a sermon on a specific part of Genesis, you don't know the rest of the story.
So is Dinah part of the 12 tribes? Or
No.
Just the men.
Just the men, yeah. And we're one son short still. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have brought trouble upon me by making me a stench to the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the people of this land. We are few in number. If they unite against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed. But they replied, should he have treated our sister like a prostitute? That's the end of chapter 34.
Jacob's hot. And this is another place where, and Mary was all upset because it seems that Jacob is upset that they've made him a stench, and it's all about him. You know, that term of becoming a stench is like to be a pariah. The people in this countryside are going to hear about this, and they're going to be hot, and they're going to decide that we outsiders don't belong here. And they may well rise up. And if they all get together, if they all are so outraged, and why shouldn't they be? And if you see this group that's moved in and they're violent enough to kill and take a whole village, the other ones are going to feel threatened. And he says, what have you boneheads done? Do you understand what you've done? The people of this countryside will hate us. And if they get together, they will kill us all, me and my entire household. And oh, that includes you. Now, you know, it's easy to look at that and say, well, he's not mad for the right reason. That was one of the things Mary said. Maybe. I mean, but he recognizes this was wrong. And you guys have done a really big evil thing here, and you've put us all at risk. And the boys, rather than being somewhat contrite, they fire back at their dad. Well, he shouldn't have defiled our sister. He shouldn't have treated our sister like a prostitute. They don't get it, and they are hardened in their position. And once again, we say all of this. We have to be wise enough to, when we see this, to see the tendency in ourselves, to be able to say, you know what, sometimes I do get in that mode where I've justified something and I'm not backing off. You know, I'm justified. They brought it on themselves. I did what I had to do. That's the position that they're in. And as we said, yes, sir.
So Scott, are you saying that when the deceitful comment was made to Shechem and Hamor about circumcision, that Jacob accepted this as a compensation or agreed to this, even though he knew that these were pagans? They are God's chosen people.
Yes.
They are not to be doing that.
No.
So Jacob is, in my opinion, not acting very much along the lines of what God would want him to act. And I'm sorry I didn't get into the part of this chapter that y'all discussed, but we remember that Jacob agreed with his mother Rebecca to deceitfully make his blind father perceive that it was Esau that was there that day.
Agreed.
And so, yes, I hear what you're saying. We're all humans. And it's beautiful that God chooses to portray, even in his chosen people, that humanity. But
well, again, I'll say this, and if you guys couldn't fully hear it, I know from the back sometimes it's hard, but you know, Jacob went along with this, and am I saying that's okay? If you decide to come back, one thing you can be sure of is I'm not saying it's okay now or ever. If it appears something like that, there's more afoot. It absolutely is not okay. And I kind of tried to call attention to the fact that the boys take over the negotiations. There's going to come a point in some of the next chapters where one of the sons goes in and sleeps with his father's concubine. And that is a sign of domination. That is someone who says, I'm taking over the tribe now. It's very, very symbolic. And what you see with I hate to do a movie reference,
do it.
But I'm going to. There's a point in The Godfather where the Don is having negotiations, and his son steps up and the Don turns and tells him, don't ever do that in front of people again. You know, I indulge my children. What I think we see here is that these boys are not boys anymore. If you start doing the math, they're well up in years, and they appear to have taken over the negotiations. We don't know where Jacob is. We don't know if this was one meeting or if the boys are doing it. Did Jacob go along with it? He had to have had some idea. He did. He just had to have, and they had no business negotiating as if they're the head of the family. The whole thing is messed up. This whole incident is notorious in the entire Old Testament as maybe one of the worst things. The rape of Dinah and what they did is notorious. So Jacob, when I say that he does some human things, like when he tells his brother, I'll catch up. That's one thing. This is something that is so, but what we see are long-term consequences. We see that doing something like this ripples down literally through millennia. They've done something bad. Did Jacob allow it to happen? Yes, he did. Is there guilt on that? Because this doesn't make sense to me that you would say all you have to do is get circumcised. That's not the same thing as following Yahweh. It's not the same thing as converting. And I tried to bring that out. That was my intent in saying that it's like saying that the circumcision is what makes you a follower of Yahweh. It's not. So there's nothing about this that is consistent with God's will. And as flaws go, this is way beyond that. This is beyond the pale. So no, I would never, ever say it. I do recognize that there are flaws within biblical characters, and they're included in the scriptures. We get to see them as not being these icons of perfection. It's not okay. In fact, if you got a few minutes afterwards, we talked about that deception that Jacob and his mother pull off. And it actually, when we say, yeah, is it time? God works all things together. There's something that comes out of that ripples down all the way to the time of Jesus. It's amazing. Nonetheless, here we have this thing that they've done. And while Jacob may not have done right, he does recognize they've gone too far. He certainly was not a party to the killing, because he is beyond upset. So much so. So even though this is the 12 tribes, those two are cut out of the will. Anything else?
It is time.
God, we see in these scriptures that you've left lessons for us. You inspire the words, you leave these things behind that we can understand and see ourselves in the things that these people do. And our need to draw close to you and to see other human beings the way you see them and not the way we justify in ourselves. And the transformation that you bring, the change of heart, that's the only way to avoid those and our need to draw close to you. And we're grateful. We're grateful for the words that get left behind. This week, my prayer would be that you soften our hearts, that you keep in our minds and in our hearts your will, your direction for us, instead of our own pride. And that you help us to recognize that you're in control and we don't have to help. Let us be better followers. Remind us of these things this week as we come across the people that you put in our lives, and give us your eyes that we see them as your children too. Amen.
Amen. You guys can unmute yourselves. I hope everybody has a good week. Sherry, are you staying in Rockport for a while? Or are you going back today?
I'll leave tomorrow morning.
Gotcha. And Julie, make sure you have a good last week on the session. Are there going to be special sessions?
You know, it depends on the last few days. I do think there will be one on school vouchers, probably in September, is everything I'm hearing. But we've got a big electricity fight going on that happens on Monday. The bills were set late yet. So we need them to pass to put rails on them. And if it doesn't pass, and it'll probably go see sunset too. And if it doesn't, then we will definitely have a special session. So
well, fingers crossed. I know how fun special sessions are.
Oh my, well, and I'm having knee surgery June 15th, and knee replacement, no matter what.
Oh, June 15th.
Yeah, I don't think I can keep doing the stairs of the Capitol without knee replacement.
Gotcha. You're doing just one?
Starting with the right one, and then after that one heals, probably doing the left one. Yeah, they're both bad.
So are you going to recover up at the lake or at home?
At first at home, and then some at the lake, and so probably a combination, but probably first at home.
And after 4 weeks, she's going to recover in Altos, New Mexico, and Montrose, Colorado.
Hopefully.
There you go. Love it. Love it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you guys all have a good week.
Thanks,
Great.
you too. Thanks,
Bye.
Mary.
Mary. Bye.
Hi, Mary.
Bye.